All right, guys, I'm going to make this one quick. The topic of discussion is what did Jesus die for? What did Jesus die for? Because I honestly believe that Jesus did not die for our sins. I honestly believe, that's my personal opinion. I honestly believe that Jesus did not die for our sins. And when I say ours, meaning, the nation of Israel, I don't believe that, you know, what we've been told, historically is far different than the truth. But I don't believe that he died for our sins. And the reason why I'm gonna tell you this, the reason why I'm telling you this is because when you look into Mark 15 and verse 7, I want to go there right quick. So if I go to Mark 15 verse 7 in the King James, the reason why I want to go over this, I want to show you Mark 15 verse 7. Let's go. Now when you go down, it says, and there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them that had made insurrection with him, who had committed murder in the insurrection. I believe the reason why the Messiah was crucified by the Roman government is because he rebelled and made insurrection. I truly believe that it was insurrection that had the Messiah killed. You can see right here, it's not a coincidence that Barabbas comes into play. It said Barabbas which laid bound with them. The them probably is referring to the recruiters, because you got to understand the Messiah had gathered 70 men, right? He gathered 70 men to be exact for the Sanhedrin, which for the court system, I believe. So yeah, let me get that right quick. You can see right here, this is Luke 10 and 1. You guys can see that. After these things, the Lord appointed other 70 also, and sent them two and two before his face into every city and place, whether he himself would come. So right there. And then also in this is in Matthew 10 and 1. If we go over, so I believe it's in Matthew 10 and 1. And when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out, and to heal all manner of sicknesses and all manner of disease. Matthew 10 and 1. Okay, so the 12 disciples here, Jesus set up 12 disciples for his cabinet or advisory board. Right there, you can see right there, he called his 12 disciples. So he got him a cabinet or advisory board. That was the 12. And then he chose 70 additional men, which you go in Luke 10 and 1. Luke 10 and 1. Right here. Wait a minute. Luke 10 and 1. Let's see something. Right here in Luke 10, verse 1. After these things, the Lord appointed other 70 also. See that? Like I showed you a couple seconds ago. He appointed other 70 also, and sent them two and two before his face into every city. So the 70 right here, he chose 70 additional man in Luke 10 and 1. For those of you that know about Hebrew history, the Sanhedrin should ring a bell, because the word 70 basically is associated with Sanhedrin. So 70 or Sanhedrin, as it is called in Greek, was the legislature or Supreme Court. Again, What you call the Sanhedrin, is just correlated to 70 right here. That was the legislature and Supreme Court of the Judean nation. And it was functioning during the time of who you call the Christ and Pilate. So you can see he went from 12 to 70 man. We already showed you that, right? We showed you that right there. Matthew 10 and 1. He chose 12 disciples for his advisory, or what you call cabinet board, and then he chose an additional 70 man for the court system, for the legislature, according to Luke 10 and 1. Now, why did the Messiah do this? Because I believe the Messiah was planning on um setting his kingdom up, man. You know, that's what I truly believe. I believe that he's making preparations, in terms of setting the kingdom up. He was making preparations to establish a kingdom in Jerusalem to overthrow the Roman Empire and set his kingdom up, man. That's why he was preaching that. Him and John was preaching, you know, uh, it says what John was saying. John was saying, prepare the way, prepare for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom of heaven is an Israelite government. I believe that they were trying to establish this Israelite government. And so the reason why I believe that the Messiah was crucified, that he died, because he was a guerrilla leader. You know what I'm saying? Like even the scholars will tell you historically, it's been said that the Messiah was a guerrilla leader, man. You know, so they don't tell you too much in the Gospels about how the Romans were oppressing the Israelite, because they try to keep it on an all-time low. They don't tell you too much about the Romans. They try to make it look like it was just the Jews' fault, and it was just the Jews who had this hatred, toward the Messiah, and that they sold him out and did all these things. But they try to keep the Romans on a low profile. And so, yeah, man, we haven't been given the truth, you see. And I truly believe that's why the Messiah died, man. I believe that's why he died. And I showed you in Mark, that was Mark 15. That's my take. I believe that's why he died. Because keep in mind, he was crucified, man. And that's a capital. Crucifixion was a capital punishment. That's another thing I want to go over. Crucifixion was a capital punishment. And we showed you in we showed you in what was that? Mark 15, verse 7 right here. There was one named Barabbas was laid bound with them, that he had made insurrection with him, who had committed murder in the rich insurrection. That him is talking about the Messiah who made insurrection with him. If you read within the context, you know what I'm saying? So when it says Jesus, you know what I'm saying? It says, but Jesus yet answered nothing right here, so that Pilate marveled. Now at the feast he released unto them one prisoner, whomsoever they desired. And there was one named Barabbas was laid bound with them. That was his recruiters. That was the Messiah's recruiters he had gathered, because they played their part in this too. And it said that made insurrection with him. Now the him right there is referring to Jesus. You see what I'm saying? So Jesus right there is the him. And it said Barabbas had made insurrection with him. So Jesus and Barabbas actually made insurrection on somebody, man. Ain't no telling. Jesus probably was crucified for killing a Roman soldier, man. And Rudolph Wisdom said the same thing. So who knows? But we know that he was a rebel leader. He was a guerrilla leader. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what I believe that he actually was the Roman Empire crucified him for. I don't believe they crucified him for um him laying his life down, for the forgiveness of your sins and you being redeemed through his blood. I believe all that came later. I believe stuff like that was interjected in the Bible, because I have a book right here and it says the Bible for Dummies. And it says, the question is, who killed Jesus? And it says, some scholars have argued that the Gospels go out of their way to excuse the Romans. Yeah, Rudolph Wilson said the same thing. See, it says scholars are up. These scholars, they are upset because they want to hide the Romans on a low profile. And Rudolph Winston in this book, Jadell Tremors on the Rome, he said the same thing. He said, take notice. He said that what did he say this at? He said that he said that yeah, on page 134, the motive was no doubt was to change the true militant Jesus as a fighter against the Romans to a passive docile one, and to present the Romans in the Gospels with their military occupation of the Holy Land as an innocent one with a low profile. So they don't tell you too much about the Romans, but we know the Romans hated the Jews with a passion, man. But they don't talk about that. You see what I'm saying? And so going back into the Bible for Dummies, it tells you on page 326, the scholars even argued that the Gospels go out of their way to excuse the Romans and to implicate the Jews in Jesus' death. This is not entirely correct. The Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, actually go out of their way not to blame the Jews. You see what I'm saying? But rather the religious leaders of the Jews. After all, nearly all the New Testament writers and most of the early Christians were Jews. The prophets of the Hebrew Bible often implicated the political and religious leaders of the Israelite community for leading God's people astray, and the New Testament writers do the same. So, again, you know, again, um, when they crucified the Messiah, let me find a picture right here. So when they crucified the Messiah, crucifixion was one of the most wretched of deaths. It was one of the most horrible ways to die of all time, top horrible ways. And crucifixion was a penalty that you receive for doing things. Now, crucifixion was practiced widely among the Roman Empire, although most often crucifixion was used in cases of insurrection. So it says right there, this is in the Bible for Dummies, page 326. It says crucifixion was used, in the case of insurrection. Secondly, crucifixion was used in the case of rebellion, and crucifixion was used in the case of murder. Lesser crimes such as robbery could also qualify. So they tell you the only way you can get on the cross if and receive this capital punishment if you was found in cases of insurrection, rebellion, and murder. Now, what did it say according to Matthew 15, verse 7? It said that there was one named Barabbas which laid bound with them that made insurrection with him. The him is probably talking about Jesus, who had committed murder in the insurrection. So that's what actually got Jesus on the cross. It was insurrection and rebellion and murder against the Roman government. It was not that, allegedly what you've been told, oh, he laid down his life for me, or he cared how much he laid. Now, I can truly say he laid down his life for his nation if he was trying to save the Israelite nation and set up, if he was trying to save Israel from the Romans, you know what I'm saying, and to set up his government. Yes, he did sacrifice his life for his people, because right here it tells you in Matthew 11, it says that the Jews was oppressed by the Romans. Right here, where is that at? It says how they take it by force. Let me see. But Matthew 11 and 12, and from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffered violence. The kingdom of heaven is known as the nation of Israel. The Jews were suffering violence by the hands of the Romans. So it says, and from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffered violence, and the violence take it by force. So a lot of Romans was forcibly, ordering Jews around and having their way with them. You can see right there how the Israelites was oppressed by the Roman government. But like I said, they don't talk too much about how Rome oppressed Israel in the Gospels, because they want to keep them on a low profile. But we know. And so as a result, I believe the Messiah, he, according to the scriptures, what we just read, go back, according to Mark 15 and 7, that it was insurrection and murder committed, man. You see what I'm saying? And so that's what got you on the cross. Insurrection, rebellion, and murder, lesser crimes such as robbery could also qualify. Slaves who had few rights could be crucified for even the most minor crimes. Conversely, Roman citizens were, except in rare cases, exempt from crucifixion. And so crucifixion, crucifixion was cruel and disgusting penalty, and they did that, in cases of insurrection, rebellion, and murder. What is clear both from the New Testament and our understanding of the Roman rule is that it says is that Caesar's execution required Roman sanction, and there is little doubt that they too were interested in removing this threat to the Roman peace, no matter how innocent. So what they did in the Gospels, they tried to hide the Roman government on a low profile, get you to believe it was the Jews that sold them out, it was the Jews that hated them, it was the Pharisees and all these other, people of this kind. But they have yet, they have yet uh, told you the truth about how the Roman government hated the Jews greatly. You know what I'm saying? And so they had their hand in that execution, man. And so they executed the Messiah, I believe, because he caused a rebellion at some point. So he was a threat to the Roman government. So you can say, to make a long story short, and they felt like he had to get up out of here. And so they crucified him, man. But as far as him laying his life down, yeah, he did that for his nation, but out of love, the Messiah didn't really even want to die like that. Because they tell you in the scriptures that he didn't even really want to die like that, man. You know what I'm saying? Because he actually prayed to the Father that the cup pass. But they make it seem like he wanted to die. Like, nah, man. So you've been told totally different. I'm gonna go over this and now I'll show you, man. So yeah. Okay, watch this. So let's go to, because he didn't want to die. Matthew 26 and 39. They make it look like he laid it like he wanted to do this. I'm gonna show you this. Watch this. All right, Matthew 26, 39. In fact, I might just need to type in Matthew 26. So when you go down to the 39th verse of Matthew 26, it says, and he went a little farther, and he fell on his face, and he prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but thy will. So right there, in contrast, the Judean Jesus believed in keeping the law, statutes, and commandments. You know what I'm saying? He would never entertain like the idea that he had to die for the sins of the world. So the Judean Jesus didn't want to die at all. And we can see right here. And these are his words right here. He said, oh, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass. Right there. Then we go down, we keep continuing to read. You can go down, you can read the rest on your own. But, these words prove that Jesus fervently wanted to escape this thing, this ordeal. He didn't want to die. His human soul poured forth profound grief with inner emotions, anticipating and hoping for some other way out, of this dire problem. Matthew states this, not as I will, but thy will. Right there. See that? Nevertheless, not as I will, but thy will. You see that? Are these his words? Or are they insertions by the later editors? So if the Messiah didn't want to die, did he say, nevertheless, not as I will, but thy will? Are these his word? Or these later insertions? You see what I'm saying? So Matthew relates to us that the Messiah prayed 3 separate times to be delivered from his predicament. This does not read like a man wants to suffer for the sins of the world. The opposite appears to be true. That is, he wanted the way out. He did not want to die for the sins of the world. So what I'm telling you now is that any more supplementary evidence that would indicate that the Judean Jesus didn't want to die for the world, we can see, man, that, he didn't want to do it, man. Jesus never intended to die on the cross. He never did. He never intended to die on the cross. And that's what people don't understand. Let's go to Matthew 26 and 47. That's what they don't understand. And while he yet spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and the elders of the people. All right. Um, Let me see. Matthew 20:46. You remember when Christ was on the cross and he was saying, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? You know, right there we can see that he expected deliverance from death when he said that, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Somewhere up in here. He expected deliverance from his death. That's why he didn't want to die, man. He expected some type of deliverance. I don't know where it's at, but you know in the gospel somewhere when on the verge of his death, he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? You know, he didn't want to die, for this is the very important piece of evidence, you know, to demonstrate that the Judean Jesus never intended to die on the cross. In addition of his own words, since he didn't intend to die, you know, then we can logically maintain that he had no intentions to die for the sins of the world. He had intentions to set up an Israelite government, but it wasn't to die, you know. Therefore, the dying for the sins of the world is the teachings and the fiction, and the teachings and the insertions of the editors, man. You know, but that's why I believe that's why he was crucified. Thank you for your time, guys. Share the video with family and friends. See you in the next lesson. Shalom.